So my research was based on exploring the characteristics and features of nurture groups in the London Borough. Just to really set the scene, I know that we're all EPs and psychologists, but I really, I really just want to give a bit of context, quickly explain what a nurture group is. So a nurture group is a targeted intervention aimed at supporting pupils who display SEMH needs. Within a nurture group, there's a teacher and TA. So the teacher sort of leads it, and the TA supporting. It has fewer than 10 pupils. It is measured by the Boxall profile in the SDQ. And of course, the Boxall profile was an instrument that was created bespoke to the nurture group. The nurture group has its own room with soft furnishings. And the whole point of it is it's a hybrid between sort of a classroom environment and a home environment. And really what research has found is that creates feelings of security for the pupils within it. And then within the nurture group, pupils receive social emotional support in addition to curriculum-based learning. And so the whole point of this is that pupils who have been chosen to be put in the nurture group are unable to access their mainstream classroom or the learning in their mainstream classroom, so they get the two things. Now I'm just going to quickly show you this, different models of nurture. So this was something that when I started off my research, I would refer to quite a lot. But actually, as the research developed and evolved, it was something I referred to sort of less and less. But when sort of researching nurture groups at the beginning, I found there's actually different models of nurture groups. And as you can see here, there's the classic model, which was the original sort of model created. And it's really just very similar to what I talked about previously. I mean, it has 10 pupils, pupils spend 3 to 4 terms within it, measured by the Boxall profile in the SEQ, and it has a teacher and a TA. You know, the whole point of having a teacher and TA is that they're able to model positive social behaviour to the children. And then there's a variation of this, and this moves really quickly. There's a variation of this called the new variant. It's a part-time model, but again, it sort of adheres to the similar characteristics of the classic model. And these two models have quite a large evidence base supporting them. Now, a lot of researchers have said there's a third model of nurture, and it's called an aberrant model, which of course is a very sort of punitive name. And we don't really know much about the model, other than sort of researchers referring to it as an inaccurate understanding of what the original purpose is, or distorted. It's a distorted model, they often say. And what I found was that the model was often referred to, but it was never actually explored. So we don't know why a school would choose to use this, you know, model as opposed to the other two, and what the features of it are. And then in sort of researching nurture groups further, am I okay? I'm hearing a bit of things in the background, so it's okay. But anyway, in researching it further, research stated there inconsistency regarding the effective characteristics of nurture groups. So we didn't really know which characteristics of the nurture group were most effective. Okay. Oh, go back one. Okay, so then in researching nurture groups further, just to explain sort of the rationale, what I looked at was I looked at nurture across the UK, and what I found actually was that each devolved nation, so Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, have their own national policies regarding nurture. And then what I found was that the majority of nurture groups within these devolved nations receive their funding from DFE. And actually what I found out is that in order to receive their funding, these schools are then asked to adhere to a strict structure and criteria. And then of course, researching a bit more, I found that England was actually the only nation in the UK not to have its own distinct policy concerning nurture. And really what I find is that the majority of funding for English schools is derived from their schools, derived from their own budgets. And for this reason, English schools are in control of how their nurture groups should be structured and how it should be managed. Okay. Hold on 2 minutes. I've just, yeah, that's fine. So yeah, so then I got onto these sort of research questions. So my first research question was, what are the common features and characteristics of nurture groups in the London Borough? The second one was, what are staff's perceptions regarding the strengths and limitations of their nurture group? And the third one, because nurture groups are an intervention specifically designed for pupils with SEMH needs, I thought it was really appropriate to involve pupils within the research and to gain their voice. The third question is, what are pupils' perceptions of their nurture group? Okay, All right, so for the methodology, I carried out semi-structured interviews of 19 participants altogether. So I had 5 SENCOs, 1 nurture group teacher, which I'll get back to later on, 7 nurture group TAs, and then 6 pupils. And these participants were across 8 schools altogether, and they were analysed using thematic analysis. And then in addition to the semi-structured interviews, I also faultily observed 8 nurture groups for an hour and a half. And so these nurture groups, or these observations, were used to sort of further contextualise the findings. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the findings and the results now. Okay, so the results revealed that all nurture groups differed in their approach. Not one was running a sort of similar nurture group. Every single one was running a very different one. And 7 out of the 8 nurture groups deviated from the guidelines in effective nurture group. And those were the guidelines I used were from Nurture UK, who are the sort of main charity within the UK running nurture groups. So what I found was there was a real disconnect between the expected orthodoxy and the reality of practice within nurture groups. So there was 12 themes altogether, but just due to time constraints, I'm only going to go through 3 with you. So one of the biggest theme within this was the role of the TA. So 7 out of the 8 nurture groups were actually managed and operated by TAs. And there was a lot of responsibility placed on these TAs. So these TAs were running the nurture group, they were talking to parents, they were assessing pupils using the Boxall profile, and they were planning the lessons as well. And what I found was that TAs really expressed a lot of anxiety about the school that they had to do, and they often expressed feelings of overextension as well. A lot of them said, you know, I've been in the training for nurture group, which is a 3-day training, and I've been told to set up the nurture group, and I don't really know how to do it. And I think really this sort of role of the TA taking charge and giving up responsibility to the TA really reflected or linked to the DIS project, which is carried out by Ian Batchford, I think it was 2013, where he says, you know, why are the most vulnerable pupils in the school being supported by those who are least qualified? And I think with regards to my project, it did raise questions regarding the inequality of support these pupils were receiving. Okay, so then I'll move on to sort of the second theme, which was the barriers to the nurture group's implementation. And one of the main sort of barriers was a lack of financial support. So a lot of the schools, a lot of the participants stated that they weren't able to run an effective nurture group because they didn't have the finances to do so. And I suppose that would explain why TAs had taken on such a big role within these nurture groups, because of course they are the readily available source, and of course they're much cheaper. Another big thing that came up as well was whole school misunderstanding. Again, I think because TAs were sort of running this nurture group and I'd be taking charge of it, they really felt undermined. And a lot of the TAs stated that a lot of teachers would send pupils to their nurture group as a punishment. And again, I think I remember another TA saying that a teacher wouldn't let her have any of her pupils because she said that they didn't want to miss out any work. So there was a real sort of lack of understanding regarding how the nurture group, understanding of the function of the nurture group. But it wasn't really all doom and gloom actually, because there were some strengths. So a lot of the TAs did report that actually, even though they were not running a sort of standard nurture group, they did think that their pupils within the nurture group had regressed with regards to their SEMH needs. Although this was a perceived strength, I just want to point that out. And I think really what that sort of comes down to, at the core issue, these pupils were receiving individualised positive attention. And you know, I think what was really happening was that the TAs were really acting as the attachment figure for these pupils within the school. So I really feel that sort of the application of being nurturing as opposed to nurture group was still having a small, like short-term impact on the pupils. However, I do think that larger impact would have been observed if schools were to follow the guidelines of an evidence-based nurture group. And there's actually research that's been conducted recently in Northern Ireland to support that. And again, participants stated that the nurture group was viewed positively by pupils. So I've seen a hand raised. I'm going to move on to the findings, or sorry, to the implications of baby practice. So I think because a main sort of finding that I thought was because there is no sort of national policy in England detailing how a nurture group should be run. I think it's all sort of, it's Nurture UK that sort of runs it instead. I think EP services themselves should maybe look at a way to create their own policy regarding nurture, and then send this out to schools and say to schools, you know, if you're going to set up a nurture group, these are the guidelines you have to follow for it to be an effective nurture group and for the nurture group to run to its full potential. I did think also that EPs could take on the role of a critical friend when supporting staff in nurture groups. I know that in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, they have created these multidisciplinary teams surrounding nurture groups, and the EPs are actually involved, and the EPs take on the role of supervisor within these meetings to really support and help the nurture group. With regards to sort of my own practice, a lot of the schools within this project where the EPs within my local authority were the link EP, and when I said to them, you know, there's nurture groups that aren't being run to their full potential, they were quite unaware. And I think really that reflected that a lot of the EPs within my service were focusing on individualised work rather than sort of whole school work. And I think with regards to the pandemic and everything, we need to look at how we can systemically support schools and look at, you know, what interventions they're using to support children with an SEN.